Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Keeping It Real on Purpose, and I am your host, Edna White. I am so glad you're with me today. Today, we're going live with somebody amazing. I want to introduce you to our guest, Alistair Gordon, a world renowned authority on subject matter experts and the founder of Expertunity. With a mission to elevate technical specialists into impactful leaders, Alistar has trained thousands of experts across the globe, helping them overcome self imposed barriers and confidently communicate their value. His work is transforming the way of industries recognize and utilize expert talent, guides SMEs to step into the influence, leadership, and their full potential. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Edna, and thank you very much indeed for the invite and the fantastic podcast.
Okay, so how do you show up in the world?
Well, it's a great question, and like a lot of the people who've been on your podcast, I think we've been through a few changes.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed there's a theme of a lot of your guests that we were all about ourselves earlier on. We were all measuring ourselves against the wrong measures, whether it's money or status or how big an office you have, etc. Although offices are less important now, of course. But but I think I've come almost full circle. I ran a lot of magazines early on for technical experts, mostly in IT, but also in finance, and I'm now sort of a mentor and coach to those people.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to write stuff for them, and now I really work closely with them. And I think I feel like I've found my reason for being here, which is there's this vast group of just amazing people, Edna. I mean, I'm so privileged to be working with them on a regular basis. And, I'm helping them get out of their own way is the way I put
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So that's how I hope I'm showing up. I'm English, living in Australia, traveling the world, having a good time, but most importantly, spending time with just some amazing people and helping them fulfill their potential.
That's awesome. So let's talk about the subject matter. What is it like to be a subject matter expert?
Well, based on our research and the thousands of people that I've met and worked with, it's tough. They would, I think, and reasonably say they're misunderstood a lot of the time, Edna.
Okay.
So, as you know, most organizations are organized pretty hierarchically, even today. So, you have your various levels of leadership, and everyone has got, those sort of development programs for leaders well organized. You start at frontline and then you go middle and then you eventually end up being God. But subject matter experts don't fit into that system very well because they're generally very well paid. They're intensely important to most of their organizations that they work for. They keep the lights on. They're in the center of innovation. They're dealing with things like COVID. When COVID hit, experts really stood up, if you remember. So they're they have this role where they've got a lot of work. They're working on multiple projects. They've got multiple bosses. Most people have trouble just having one. They have multiple ones.
Okay.
And they struggle to prioritize and get it all done. And, occasionally that can be very pressured and stressful for them. So they get a bit stuck. And so our task really is to help them, think about that and think about how do you get unstuck? How do you fulfill your potential? How do you work on the stuff you really want to work on? So, mostly I think they, the change that they can make in themselves is enormous. Like it's mind blowing to see how with a little bit of a mindset change, which is what your podcast is all about, a little bit of a mindset change can make an enormous difference.
That's right. That's exactly right. So give us a few examples of the most common self-imposed barriers.
So I think the first self-imposed barrier is workload. They like being asked for their advice, and they like being respected for their technical acumen and
Hmm.
skills. So they tend to take on too much. They tend to think that they're the only people who can do it, and sometimes, of course, that's true, right? And they're also a second one would be they're perfectionists, Edna.
Okay.
So they want to make
Okay.
sure that it's done absolutely right to a fault, actually.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
so, so they end up being constantly dragged in to fix things, put out fires, and they work themselves into a position where they're the
Hmm.
only one who can fix it,
Right.
and that is definitely a self-imposed challenge
Yeah.
for them, I think.
Oh, that's a good one. I like those two. I like those two. Stay really close. So, how does the technical experts kind of factor into this?
Well, the interesting thing is that in order to achieve this mindset change and get control back of their lives and
Okay.
prioritize correctly, they need to use a set of skills that we call enterprise skills that
Hmm.
probably when we first meet them, they don't think are important at all. They
Okay.
think that their ticket to the game is their technical skills. Let's take a
Hmm.
software developer, for example. They're brilliant
Hmm.
at developing software and writing code and what have you. And they think getting better and better and better at writing better code, more elegant
Yeah.
code, that is progression. The
Right.
problem is that all the other bits, like being able to manage stakeholders, manage their time, prioritize
Hmm.
projects,
Hmm.
understand what motivates their stakeholders, and maybe understand what motivates the customers of the organizations they're working with. These are all
Right.
skills that actually really help them gain control of their technical output. So most people don't realize that the enterprise, they call them soft skills, Edna. You and I know that
Right.
there's nothing soft about them at all. They're hard to learn, hard to
Yeah,
deliver.
that's right.
But
Yeah, that. Yeah.
they're quite actually dismissive of soft skills, generally speaking, when you first talk to them,
Hmm. Hmm.
because they think it's we're rushing around hugging people all the time, and that's what soft skills are. But actually, it's making sure that we're heard properly, we're connecting to
Yeah.
corporate strategy or community
Right.
strategy, whatever it might be. So once we get them working on those enterprise skills and mastering
Hmm.
those skills, it takes them to another level of technical impact, and that's really what they're after. They want to be the best experts they can possibly be and do brilliant work.
Absolutely. Hmm. Is that is that said to you a lot from a lot of your clients that they want to be the best that they can be? Or
Definitely.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
In fact, I'd go as far as to say, I do quite a lot of leadership programs as well, with
hmm,
people leaders, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have had the experience of going on some sort of a leadership course or seeing their leader go on a leadership course, and they come
hmm,
off the course saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do X and do Y differently and all this," and they don't. They do maybe make a few changes.
right,
With experts, once they see there's a higher level of expertise they can reach, they attack it with military precision.
hmm,
Really amazing, because they're all intensely
okay,
smart, and
hmm,
really capable of executing. So once they see that higher level that they can operate at, they really they kick in. The other thing that they ask us all the time is they want to have more influence and more impact. And
yeah,
the biggest question I probably get asked is, why don't people listen to me? I'm the expert. Why don't they listen to me? And that's a pretty fundamental question.
okay. What industry or profession do you specialize in?
Well, we've had maybe I've worked with probably people with 600 different job descriptions. So
Wow.
anyone who has so a lot of IT, a lot of
Uh-huh.
finance, a lot of risk. I'm
Okay.
just working in the UK with a space company, so they're all space engineers. Um,
Hmm.
uh, Community-driven organisations, looking after safeguarding our finances and what have you. So government
Right.
enterprises,
Hmm.
um, environmental enterprises, water companies, you name it.
Right.
Any
Right.
organisation that has people with deep technical skills in it tend to
Hmm.
have, about 20% of the population of most
Right.
organisations are technical experts.
Right. In the industries that I mentioned, and you were part of, like maybe you had a couple of, a couple of clients in each one. Which one did you see that had the most, I guess, success?
What a great question. Well, I think probably in IT, because IT departments, generally speaking, have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of influence across a lot of the organization.
Right.
They very often, like for example, IT people have developed the studio software that we're using today to stream this, and we're very excited that they've written this fantastic program. But we expect it to work, right? We expect it to work
Right.
seamlessly all the time. So a lot of in IT, I think a lot of the work IT departments do is invisible until it doesn't work. And then, of course, people really sort of, oh, why isn't it working? So if you
Right.
think about, if most of your your listeners think about how often they use email, which will be a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time every day, we
Mm-hmm.
expect it to work. Now,
Right.
if you get a communication messaging specialist, which I've worked with, they'll tell you that making it work seamlessly all the time is really hard work. People are trying to
Mm-hmm.
break the system all the time.
Right.
So they work 364 days a year to make it feel like it's just
Right.
turning on the tap and running water. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as it doesn't work, we're onto them.
Right.
So I think sometimes they do a lot of things that are a thankless task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Until we
Yeah.
don't have it.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Does make sense. It makes a
and
lot of sense.
this is why, Edna, sometimes I think they feel undervalued
Yeah.
because people don't understand the amount of hard work and technical brilliance they need to deploy all the time in
Yep.
order to make our lives just really easy. And so one of the questions we ask technical experts that we work with is, do you really expect Edna or Alistair to understand all that stuff you do? I mean, we if you start describing it to me in detail, our eyes
Mm-hmm.
roll and we lose the will to live, right? So I think sometimes they need to understand that the work they do is
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling in its
Appreciate.
own
Oh
right. They
yeah.
don't
Oh yeah.
necessarily need a lot of recognition for it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So let's segue into your company, Expertunity. Tell us about the mission of that.
So we have a pretty simple mission, which you're very generously contributing to today, which is to try and help 1 million technical experts around the world fulfill their potential. We reckon there's about 40 to 45 million technical subject matter experts around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we reckon that probably less than 100,000 actually get any meaningful development paid for by their organizations. So our mission is to convince organizations they need to help develop technical experts to help them fulfill their potential.
Mm-hmm.
And our second mission is to help experts help themselves. So we've created
Well,
some tools, and the book that probably caught your attention, Master Expert. So we tried to put everything into something so to make it really accessible. We're a relatively small company based in Australia. We operate globally, and we have about 100 clients. But if we really want to make a big difference, we have to do a lot of outreach, and this is where you're really helping. Thank you.
okay. And tell us a little bit about the book as well, since I completely forgot to ask about it because what you were talking about was so relatable. I was like, oh, okay. I
Well,
got absorbed in the information.
yeah. So I'm not sure I ever want to write a book again, Edna. It took 3 years, and it was like extracting teeth on a regular basis. My editor described it as putting needles in your eyes, but no,
Oh
it's
my
about
goodness,
yes.
that's
But
that might be bad, really bad.
yeah, so what we did is a very interesting exercise actually, because we've written it 3 times, Dominic and
Mm-hmm.
I, and we did a beta version and shared it with experts, and so it's ended up being much bigger. It's really Master Expert. I would describe as a textbook. Really, it's not.
Okay.
And it's one of those things that has like 50 chapters, and each of those deal with a key thing that experts could get better at. And we encourage people just to sort of dive into it. They can go straight to chapter 26, and that will
Mm-hmm.
solve the problem for Monday. And chapter 28 might solve the problem for Tuesday. We also now have an assessment they can do to figure out which areas they need to build their skills in most, which we do for free for them. So so I think the book really is there to help experts understand what's getting in the way of them fulfilling their potential and doing great work. They're already doing great work, but doing even greater work. And it's very practical, very hands-on, lots of sort of case studies of experts that we've worked with and how they've resolved their issues and added more value. So it's you wouldn't necessarily read it from start to finish. You jump in and use the bits you need and
Oh, that's good. I
yeah,
like a
yeah,
book like that. I like a
yeah.
book like
And it has
that.
lots of pictures, Edna. It has lots of pictures.
I guess so. All right. I like a book I can hop around and use all the information as
Yeah,
needed. Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's good.
Well, I think, people are very time poor these days, and reading a
Mm.
really huge book is an issue. But so it's kind of a reference guide. That's the way
Mhm.
it'd be used. But yes, it took 3 years to get to fruition, so I had to have a very long lie down after the completion.
I know the feeling. All right, all
I'm
right.
sure
I
you
get that.
do.
What? Yeah. How can they locate that book? What link can
So
they go to?
Master Expert's available on all the book platforms pretty much,
Okay.
and the actual assessment they can do for free is at expertship.com. So www.expertship.com. And they're able to go in and do the assessment, and they get a free report. And then there's a couple of books that they can buy if they want to follow up with what they're doing. So
Okay.
as I say, we're keen to help. Anyone can reach out to us. We're keen to help people. They don't have to have budget. We want to outreach as much as we possibly can and help people. And I might say the feedback that we get from people who have been on our more formal programs is that it transforms their life. I notice a theme with some of the guests that you have, Edna, on the podcast, is that what you're trying to change at work also has the same effect at home. And this is very, very true. Like understanding your kids and your partner, and getting better at communication, being more empathetic, really listening hard to what people are actually saying and feeling. All of those things are, you can imagine, are very important for subject matter experts when they're dealing with their stakeholders at work, but obviously they're incredibly important at home. And a lot of the people we work with are quite introverted, and very thoughtful. It's that technical. It's not everybody, but 80% of technical experts are quite introverted. So giving them techniques, not to necessarily bring them out of their shell and become extroverts, but to really communicate effectively with people.
Right.
And it
That's good.
is an important part of what we do.
That's good. That's a really good thing that you're doing. I think you gave me a new another level of education on services like that. Like I know it's so thick in you're realizing, it's so thick. I didn't think about that. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
Yeah.
we're always
Well,
thinking about the people that use them, say if a kid gets addicted, we think about the kid or, whatever, but we never
yes.
think about the people in the background at all that kind of do this work. It brings
Well,
a new light to things.
the number of things that we just completely take for granted now is astonishing.
Oh yeah.
We turn on the tap and we expect clean water to come out of it. End of
Hmm.
story. And I was just literally working with a water company last week, and just that simple thing of getting clean water to somebody,
Yeah.
is hugely complicated. And bearing in mind that a lot of water companies, this would be the same in the States as it is in Australia, they're working with quite old infrastructure now. So
Wow.
they're literally
Okay.
having to keep the water coming and update the infrastructure, which is 100 years old, so
Right.
or longer. So
Right.
one of the most fascinating parts of my job is learning just how complicated simple things are, to do.
You
And
made me a believer of that today.
once you get a water engineer, once you show interest with a water engineer about how does it, oh my goodness, off they go, so it's really,
Right.
it's exciting.
That's really well. I love what you do. I
Thank you
want to
so
encourage
much.
you to keep doing what you're doing. Definitely want to keep in touch with you, and yeah, I definitely want to keep in touch with you because now it all is like you took me to another level today, Alistair. You did really, you really did, really did.
Thank you so
That
much.
was powerful. I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. I got it now. Very good. Very
Isn't
good.
it amazing how most of the most things, they are obvious once someone points it out to you, right? But we
Yes.
have a complete blind spot for them.
Yeah. When you explained it, I was like, wait, what? I could see it. It was just that bright. I just love I love that about what I just learned with you, because I was like, oh, okay, we'll see how we get through it. But we did a great job. You and I together. We did a great job.
Well,
We
thank you
really
so
did it today. Yes.
much.
And audience, I got something out of it. Who knew, right? Yeah. I always tell that my audience that I get more out of it than they do.
Well, that's right. You get to ask the questions as well, which is great.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate you all being here today. Thank you all who popped on by and maybe said hello. Thank you very much. Out there in YouTube land, we're really loving it. And thank you so much for being my guest today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Edna. Thank you so much.
All right. If you could give one line of something that you can encourage them with, what would it be?
Um, I I would I would say to them, you might be thinking it's everybody else's fault you're not having the influence and impact you have, but you can do a lot about it with not much time and not much effort. You're smart enough. You can really move the needle in terms of your influence and impact if you say, what should I do differently in order to have more influence and impact?
Woo. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard that today, and we thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks so much. And this is Edna White and my esteemed guest saying good night and goodbye for now.